Good afternoon, everyone. We will go ahead and call the January 2023 meeting of the Cobb County Board of Elections and Registration to order at 3:01 p.m. Hopefully, everyone on the board, you've had an opportunity to review the agenda. If there are any proposed revisions to the agenda, nope, hearing none, we'll approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor, actually, we can just do it by consent. Yes? Yes. Excellent, thank you. We'll now move on to the public comment portion of our meeting. I note that there are two individuals that signed up to participate via WebEx and a number here in the chambers with us. Do we have anyone, either a Mr. or Miss, no, I'm sorry, Miss Wilson, Denny Wilson, or Judy King on the line?
No, there are no attendees online.
Oh, okay. Well, it's even better to see you in person. Hello. I see a Judy King signed in here. Denny Wilson? Okay. You didn't sign in here, but you're still on the list, so that's perfectly fine. I apologize. I didn't see your name there. All right. Well, we will go ahead and then take public comments here in the chambers. Mr. Parks? And if I might just remind everyone, the time limit for public comment today is 5 minutes.
Would you be kind enough to put this up on the screen so everybody can see for what it's worth? Thank you. Good afternoon. Got a brief presentation on how I think we can improve election integrity and how to improve how elections need to be operated to make them more accurate, less costly, more honest, and fairer. Ban the use of illegal ballot marking devices, thus eliminating the illegal QR codes. Ban the use of Dominion scanners. Return to the exclusive use of hand-marked paper ballots. Eliminate early voting. There are reasons our founders only allowed a single day to vote. Count all the ballots at the precinct as soon as the polls close on election day. Eliminate absentee ballots except for disabled individuals as it used to be. Use security-grade ballot material. Include a tear-off strip so the voter can go back and see how their ballot was counted. Eliminate election day registration. Constantly maintain voter rolls to remove those no longer eligible to vote. Eliminate drop boxes. Improve chain of custody by maintaining adequate records for verification. Require all chain of custody forms to be properly documented and saved. Improve verification when receiving absentee ballots and keep original envelopes for verification of number of ballots received. This will prevent additional ballots being added to the mix. Number of envelopes must equal number of ballots. All poll watchers must be allowed to be close enough to actually see what is taking place. Perform signature verification between ballot envelope and registration form, not the ballot application. In case you're not aware, it is legal and proper to hold elections in Georgia on paper. The city of Milton has recently changed their laws to implement the practice. Cobb needs to do the same thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. Now we'll note that I know I received this via email as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Fisher?
Good afternoon, Debbie Fisher, East Cobb. First, I'll start with, without boring everyone with things that I've brought up in past meetings, for the irregularities that happened during this election cycle. But I will address some issues that happened during the runoff that I think needs to be brought to light. One thing that I will give huge kudos for, and I want to make clear, I have the greatest respect for this board, for what you're challenged with, and for every single election worker who is working these long, ridiculous hours that they have to work all throughout the election. With that said, I will say, for the first time in maybe a very long time, during the general and the runoff, I can say that Democrats and Republicans did work in sync through the entire tabulation process. We were in consistent agreement with the irregularities that happened during the primary and the general. Both sides brought those to light to this board as well as the state election board. With that being said, I'm going to talk about a couple of things that were greatly disturbing to me during the tabulation process. We never got daily numbers throughout this entire election cycle. We use those to schedule our people. Our people are putting in as many hours as people who are paid. Neither side gets paid for being a monitor, a panelist, for VRP or duplication. Time was wasted sitting there waiting for ballots to be processed, and it's unnecessary. So I would ask this board to work on a policy that requires the schedule to open ballots as they are arriving. One of my biggest concerns is the change of procedures that happened during the runoff. I happen to be a monitor. There were 6 voter audit panels opening ballots. The process had been changed by someone because they were not examining the envelopes as required by state policy. I brought it to 2 supervisor attentions, and they both said no, they weren't required to do that. I then brought it to Ms. Hamilton's attention. She also said no, they weren't required to do that. I pointed out that I could give her their own policy that would refute what she was saying. She went and got the policy. She stopped everyone from opening the ballots and finally did what she should have done from the beginning. The second thing that was quite concerning, a couple of you were present for, and that was duplicating ballots that had been printed on white paper that had already been duplicated. And A, I want to know why white paper was even available. And B, I want to know why anyone would ask to duplicate a ballot without first spoiling the one that had been wrongly printed on plain paper. That should never happen. That means you're doubling the number of active ballots that can be scanned. So again, I ask this board to look at setting policy that prevents this from happening in the future. Also, I recommend you add to the policy that things or procedures should not be changed during the election. We had the poll pad pilot test. We had the BMDs added to use for duplication, changing the intent of the voter from a paper ballot to one that is printed with a QR code. We had the BMDs changed during the general election to be used for provisional ballots. We had the auditing of the ballot opening that was wrong. We had the duplication of non-spoiled ballots. one board member and your legal counsel were present for my disagreement with Ms. Hamilton. I hope that that is addressed.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Your time has expired. And I also know that I received your email, or we received your email as well. I know that Ms. Evler acknowledged it, and she noted that she is out of the office until Monday. I believe, well, the day after Monday, the 16th, given the holiday. Yeah, a week from tomorrow. So I anticipate that either she, someone will from the office will be in response.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. King, Judy King?
I am a citizen of Cobb County, and I am disappointed in the way this previous election was run, with the Board of Elections not getting out absentee ballots in a proper manner, that the referendum for the city of Mapleton was incorrect, and you had to post it on the wall, how it should have been read, that, and this is only information that I have through the media, that there were people who voted that shouldn't have voted. There was people who did not have the Mapleton referendum on their ballot. I don't think it's right for the Board of Elections to decide whether there was a proper number of people or not, that there should be a revote. Also, that we are now having to pay for the Mapleton election, and that should be sent back to the state legislature, and that the Board of Elections should complain, as well as the Cobb County Commissioners and the chairwoman, that the charter should be reopened, and that the people of Mapleton wanted that city, then let them pay for that election. It is not proper that all of Cobb County have to pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. King. Ms. Reardon, Pam Reardon.
I'm going to attempt to speak. Can't shake this cold. So my name is Pamela Reardon, and I am a citizen of Cobb County. I am going to talk about, I support everything that Debbie just said, because I was there as well and saw that. So what I'm going to talk about is the fact that this board has enjoined a lawsuit and is now incurring, along with the Board of Commissioners, I think, that I know of, 4 attorney costs that the taxpayers of this county are going to be paying. Number one, this board conducted elections in the primary using the maps that were adopted and signed by the governor earlier in the year of last year for the primary. And then conducted runoffs and conducted the general election using the maps, and a duly elected commissioner was elected. And how can you go back and say, oh no, that's wrong, we want to redo, or what are we saying here anyway? Because home rule is not a constitutional law in Georgia. If that was the case, every single county would be able to go and draw their own maps. The only thing it says is a municipality can draw their maps, and the cities, okay? And they can make their own laws. So our government here in Cobb County can make laws, but they can't override the laws of the state. So I'm not an attorney, but I can even figure out and read the Georgia Constitution and figure out that this is all kabuki theater. But 3 or 4 lawyers now are on the payroll, and that we're having to pay, the citizens of Cobb County are having to pay for. When we all know that Jerica decided to move, and she knew that the redistricting was coming up, And she knew this was going to happen and spent all 1 year saying nothing. And then the commissioners decided to do this. So this has never been done before. And what the commissioner says, well, you know, there's no real precedent. Well, yeah, because it's not in the Constitution. That's why it's not precedent. It's precedent for the counties to make their own laws, but not their own lines. So we would have chaos if all the counties decided to redraw all the lines all of a sudden. So I totally object to this, and I object to the taxpayers paying for all the attorneys. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reardon. Christine Rosman.
Good afternoon. I wanted to talk about what there's so many similarities between what's happening in Maricopa County and what's happening in Cobb County with the elections. And there were a lot of similarities. I'm surprised there's not a lot of dialogue going back and forth, and maybe there is. One of them is that it appears that they are using, if not 100% of the same equipment that Cobb County is using, that very, very similar equipment. They're also having, both have had inordinate amounts of irregularities and inordinate amount of rejected ballots from the scanners. And I think that had to do with like the wrong size paper, what have you. But I did work over at the elections office for the recount or the runoff and what have you. And those ballots were so mangled, I guess that was one of the reasons why there was such an issue with it. But also is that if the wrong size ballots were causing the rejections in addition to the mutilation that happened with the ballots, because it said to, cut at or tear at the perforated line. There was no perforation, there was no line, so people just made up their own, which really caused a lot of havoc. Anyway, and then they also, both counties, Maricopa and Cobb County, lots of questions on the chain of custody too. So I just thought, well, golly, we're really like kind of neck and neck with the issues that they're having. So I would like to also agree with everything Debbie Fisher said, also with what Pam Reardon said about this whole thing with the redistricting is it really is a slap in the face to the Cobb County citizens that this is costing us an inordinate amount of money. Like, we probably would have been better off cutting Jerica Richardson a check for $1 million so that she could have moved into her district instead of because I think it was pretty well known that we were going to have, there was going to be some redistricting due to the census. So if you know there's going to be redistricting, then right after you get elected, it seems odd that she would go to the very perimeter of her district to then buy a house that if she knew that the lines were going to. Just very odd stuff, but also very odd and infuriating, frankly, that we are kind of pushing the Georgia Constitution, over to the side to accommodate a certain commissioner. So this stuff doesn't make sense to me. So thank you. And that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Rossman. Ms. Denny Wilson?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Denny Wilson, and I'm from District 4. I live in the unincorporated area of Austell, which is now formerly the newly formed city of Mableton. I've been fighting this city of Mableton move since 2017, and I have not had a good night's sleep since this thing passed. I mean, because I don't live in Mableton. And if the citizens of Mableton wanted to become a city, then become a city. But don't land grab the areas around to put us into something that we did not want. And I've been on record since 2017. I happened to read the bill, which is something that if I could reach my foot up to my butt and kick it, I'd kick my own butt. Because I should have read that bill when it was first introduced to the legislators. And, you know, one of the reasons I'm not sleeping is because I failed my community on that, because normally stuff like that doesn't get past me. But I didn't read the bill, I didn't read the language, which was mind-boggling because I think the language in the bill, a lot of people didn't understand what they were voting for. I voted no, but there were people in unincorporated Austell who voted yes because they didn't think that this applied to them. They thought it was just for the city of Mableton because they have an Austell address. I listened to you guys last meeting where Janine Eveler, the elections director, said that there were people who voted in the city, in the election for the city of Mableton, that didn't live there. There were some who voted that should not have voted. There were some who voted on one side of the street, and then the people on the other side of the street didn't get to vote. Well, guess what I discovered last night? I have a friend who lives in 30126, which is Mableton. Their condos are not even in the city of Mableton. So now here we got another problem. I mean, there's just been so many problems with this. I just think it should have been put back on the ballot and revoted. I mean, then I just heard that another subdivision that had been annexed into Smyrna, now they got to come back into the city of Mableton, and they never voted on it. So now we got another problem. I mean, this whole thing from day one has just been a mess. And I mean, it's the worst nightmare of my life. I mean, almost down to the point to where I've considered selling my house and just moving on. I mean, because if this was a good thing for the community, then I could bless it. And I have my opinion. The people who voted yes have their opinion. If we have to go forth with it, then I have to go forth, but I have to make a decision. Do I stay in the city? Do I sell my house and move on? Or what do I do? But as a board for elections, you guys, I think, probably read that question. And you should have known that that question would not have been clear for voters, because even though I knew to vote no, because like I said, I've opposed this since 2017, but most people who saw that question on the ballot, they didn't know, because it mentioned term limits, and you know, it was just a question that people did not understand. Then it said Mableton, but it said nothing about the surrounding areas. So, you know, going forth, I think you guys need to not let a group of people bamboozle a community and get them into something that they don't want. And I think that's the representation that you guys should give us, you know, as board members. I mean, I think that somebody on this board should have looked at that question and they should have said, hey, this raises grave concerns, because did they not have to put the question before you before they put it before the legislation? I mean, or even when they put it before the legislation, they had to bring it to you to put it on the ballot. So, you know, it's almost like it went on the ballot unnoticed. And now the citizens in other parts of Cobb has to pay for an election for the city of Mableton, because the other three cities that were proposed that failed, they had a clause in that they would pay Cobb County back in 2 years to put on their election. There's nothing to that effect in this bill for the city of Mableton, which means that that's another tax, you know, that the citizens are gonna have to pick up.
Ms. Wilson, that's 5 minutes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. White, and thank you, Ms. Wilson, for being here. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, that would be the approval of the meeting minutes for our December 12th board meeting. Have all board members had an opportunity to review the meeting minutes as provided? Does anyone have any comments, questions, or concerns, or proposed amendments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Bruning. Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Mossbacher. It's been moved and properly seconded to approve the board meeting minutes for our December 12th meeting as presented. All of those in favor? I see that you've noted opposition, Mr. Gartland. The motion still passes at 4-1. Thank you. Moving on to new business. It's necessary for us to make a few modifications to the previously approved meeting dates and locations for these board meetings. New business is a proposal to change our February meeting to the February the 6th. That meeting will take place here. There's also a proposal to change our March 13th meeting to March 27th for certification, as we will be conducting a special election during the month of March. And then in connection with that special election, to add a meeting for election night, that being March the 21st. Any comments, concerns, or questions with regard to the proposed meeting changes and location? Nope. If there are no proposed changes here, we'll just entertain a motion to approve all three changes. Ms. Mossbacher, is that a first?
Yes.
Or a motion?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly changed to accept the proposed changes as presented. All those in favor? The motion carries. I do not believe that there is any old business to raise. However, if anyone on the board believes that there is, please go ahead and make reference to it. Old business? No? No? Board member comments is the next item on the agenda. Does anyone have comments? No. Mr. White, I do believe it's important, especially given some of the comments that were made during public comment with respect to the litigation. Obviously, during the last convening of this board, we authorized you to prepare a motion. We subsequently determined that we were not going to move forward with that motion. Obviously, litigation was filed by a Cobb County citizen. I'm happy to make these comments, but I do believe it's more appropriate for you to provide just a high-level reference to what took place, given the fact that we approved that motion outside of executive session, but during the last month's meeting. So if you could just provide just a very high-level update as to what transpired with respect to the BOC General Assembly issues around redistricting and the current status, the current posture of that litigation.
Okay. Sure, and I'm happy to do that. Yes, you're correct. The motion last time was to authorize council to prepare I think it was termed a motion, but it was really a petition for declaratory judgment, and that was done and circulated among the board. And I think in seeing I think the board's consensus after we circulated that and seeing it laid out in petition form, that it wasn't something that the board felt like it should be the party to file it. It felt like more of a matter to be brought up by a citizen because there just, I think, without going into the details, the order of events sort of made it where the last step in the action wasn't really ours to take, the board's to take. And so, but it, as predicted, a lawsuit was filed between that week of Christmas and New Year's, and the court pretty quickly set a hearing on it. The original complaint named just this board after discussions with that attorney for the plaintiff, for Mr. Savage. They had made the decision to join the county. So they were actually, they amended, and the county also moved to intervene. And so I know there was a comment made that there was like 4 attorneys appearing. Well, 3 of the attorneys are the county attorneys that they just they're in-house attorneys for the council and work full-time for the Board of Commissioners. And so they represented the counties, and I appeared on behalf of this board and Janine. And so that hearing, Judge Harris held a hearing on the 4th and, heard several hours of argument. She seemed to focus really specifically on the need for an interlocutory injunction, which is just whether the court needs to hold things in place while that issue gets litigated. And without going into too much detail of where I felt like she was going with it, it's a little bit moot at this point because I think the plaintiff's attorney, I can't really speculate what the plaintiff was thinking, but by Friday, the hearing was Wednesday, and by Friday, the plaintiff dismissed his lawsuit without prejudice. So that means it's possible for the plaintiff to refile it, or any party to refile it. So there's not currently a lawsuit pending on that issue. And just in terms of where that leaves the board, if we're going in chronology of action, the state maps were passed last March, or signed last March and enacted. There were 2 rounds of elections that were held there. The county then, Board of Commissioners then used the home rule provisions, which allow counties to amend local laws, which is what the original legislation was, that allowed home rule allows counties to amend certain local laws, and they've taken the position that redistricting is one of the things they can do. This board, really was sort of caught between the county's position and the state's position, and had thought about taking that action, I think, directly to the court, and we're hoping a plaintiff would bring it so that we'd have some clear direction on it. But at this point, there's not a lawsuit pending. So right now, the amendment that the county passed in October is still in place until a court says that it's invalid. So it's a little bit of an odd position because in the county, in our system, the new maps haven't been entered. The new county maps haven't been entered yet. So if people go to their My Voter page, they might end up seeing their state, location. But the county's asked us to put their maps in place. It's going to take some time. We want to get it right. And there's not right now a pending election that needs to happen. The next election will be 2024. So if another plaintiff comes along and files a lawsuit challenging it, then the court could order differently. But I think over the next few months, those maps will be implemented and people will start seeing their maps, their district differently in the My Georgia voter system. But in the meantime, I think that the maps will be posted at some point. It's my understanding the Board of Elections will post the new maps. And so that's where this board is. And I reiterate what we said at the hearing, which is this board doesn't, whether it's a political issue or whether it's a state versus county power, this board does not see itself as the interpreter of the law. That's for the courts to do. That's a very basic civics law that we learned back in the day. It's the court's job to interpret the law. We were sort of hoping the court would weigh in, whether it was last week or hopefully in a more thorough briefing, and they may still if another party comes along. But this board at this point has to follow what's been passed until it gets overturned. And so that's sort of the high level position where we are today.
Okay, thank you. Again, I thought it important, given some of the comments that have made, there is no current litigation that involves this board. And with respect to the attorneys that were present representing the county, as Mr. White made reference to, he does represent this board, and he represented Ms. Eveler. The other 3 lawyers are Cobb County employees. So this county incurs their salary irrespective of litigation, no different than Ms. Hamilton's salary or any other county employee's salary. So again, thought it important to raise that point during board member comments. Don't know as to whether any of my colleagues have any additional comments or anything they'd like to address. Nope. Hearing none, Mr., I know you have provided that update. Obviously, that's litigation. We have other litigation that's pending unrelated to the redistricting. Is there a need for executive session?
If the board wants an update on, there are there's really 3 or 4 separate cases, 2 in federal court and then 2 state court cases pending that I'm happy to give you an update on, or if you want me to give you an update by email, I'm happy to do that. There's no pending hearings that I know of between now and the next meeting, but if someone refiles in the commission case, that could lead to one, but I'm happy to either give you a quick brief in executive session about the 4 cases that are pending, or we can wait until.
Happy to defer to the majority. Doesn't sound like there's anything of urgency there, given the disposition last Friday of the litigation that was pending. Okay. Well, there being no need to go into executive session, we will adjourn our Board of Elections January meeting at 3:37 p.m. Thank you, everyone, for being here.